Apocalypse Now, the haunted legacy behind a war epic. There are films that entertain, others that provoke. And then there are those that haunt, films that linger in the collective subconscious long after the final frame has faded to black. Apocalypse Now, 1979, directed by the singular Francis Ford Coppola, is one such cinematic ghost. Set against the infernal backdrop of the Vietnam War, it's a fever dream that burned its way into cinema history, not just for its artistry, but for the mythos that formed around its creation. At its heart, Apocalypse Now is a journey into madness. But what makes it even more powerful is the very real toll it took on those who brought it to life. The production itself became infamous, shot in the jungles of the Philippines, plagued by typhoons, budget overruns, heart attacks, breakdowns, and existential crises. It was a war film made in the chaos of war. And for many of the actors involved, the experience would forever mark them. Decades have passed since Apocalypse Now stormed theaters and walked away with the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Yet time, relentless and impartial, has claimed several of its unforgettable cast members. These were actors who, each in their own way, embodied the mania, beauty, and horror of this epic descent into darkness. From the enigmatic Marlon Brando to the electrifying Dennis Hopper, from the brooding Sam Bottoms to the underrated Frederic Forrest, their contributions turned the film into legend. Their departures, however, remind us that even legends are mortal. This video is a tribute, not just to a movie, but to the souls behind it. The men who dared to stare into the heart of darkness and, for a moment, became it. We'll look back at the lives and careers of these 5 actors who gave Apocalypse Now its unforgettable power, and who are no longer with us. Their stories, both on screen and off, deserve to be remembered. Let us begin. Marlon Brando, the god of method acting, lost in the jungle of his own making. When Marlon Brando arrived on the set of Apocalypse Now, he was already a living legend, and a walking contradiction. The man who had redefined screen acting with A Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, and later The Godfather, now stepped into the role of Colonel Kurtz, a once revered military man turned demigod of the jungle, mad with power and shrouded in shadow. The parallels between Brando and Kurtz were uncanny. By 1976, Brando had grown disillusioned with Hollywood. He was overweight, mercurial, and notoriously difficult to work with. When he showed up in the Philippines, he hadn't read the script, was unfamiliar with Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and insisted on improvising most of his scenes. Coppola, already teetering on the edge of collapse, was forced to film Brando in deep shadow to conceal his appearance, and perhaps, to amplify the mystery. And yet, despite all the chaos, Brando delivered something unforgettable. His deep, halting whispers. His poetic monologues. His otherworldly presence. Colonel Kurtz wasn't just a character, he was a myth, crafted in real time by a man wrestling with his own legend. His famous line, the horror, wasn't just an echo of the story's climax. It was a whispered confession from Brando himself. Marlon Brando passed away on July 1, 2004, at the age of 80. In life, he was a revolutionary. In death, he became a symbol of what happens when genius and excess collide. His legacy is immortal, not just because of the roles he played, but because of how he transformed the very meaning of acting. Apocalypse Now was one of his last great on-screen appearances, a haunting, enigmatic farewell from the man who once ruled the screen like a god. Frederic Forrest, the chef who couldn't stand the heat of war or fame. Among the many memorable figures aboard Captain Willard's patrol boat in Apocalypse Now, Chef Hicks stands out as a man totally unprepared for the madness of Vietnam. Played with intense vulnerability by Frederic Forrest, Chef wasn't a hardened soldier. He was a New Orleans cook, caught in a war that had no recipe, no rules, and no escape. Forrest's portrayal was so raw, so unnervingly real, that it blurred the line between performance and breakdown. Forrest didn't have the fame of Brando or the eccentricity of Hopper, but he brought something else, authenticity. He was the everyman, frightened, confused, and deeply human. In one unforgettable scene, after a terrifying encounter with a tiger in the jungle, Chef collapses into a panic, screaming, "Never get out of the boat!" It's a moment both absurd and horrifying, and Forrest nailed it with trembling honesty. Off-screen, Frederic Forrest was a character actor's character actor. He didn't seek the spotlight, but when given the chance, he left an indelible mark. His role in The Rose, 1979, earned him an Oscar nomination, and he worked steadily through the 1980s and 90s, often under the radar, always respected by his peers. Despite his talent, Forrest never quite broke into the A-list. He preferred it that way. Frederic Forrest passed away on June 23, 2023, at the age of 86. His death didn't make headlines the way Brando's did, but for cinephiles and fans of Apocalypse Now, it was a quiet, aching loss. In a film dominated by gods and monsters, Forrest was the soul, the man who reminded us what it means to be human when everything around you is falling apart. Sam Bottoms, the surfer kid who rode into the heart of darkness. With sun-bleached hair, a boyish grin, and an air of easygoing charm, Sam Bottoms brought a strange innocence to the violent chaos of Apocalypse Now. As Lance B. Johnson, the Navy surfer turned machine gunner, Bottoms played a character who slowly dissolves into the madness of war, not with anger or rebellion, but with a chilling detachment that reflects the film's psychedelic descent into oblivion. Lance starts off as the embodiment of California cool, more interested in catching waves than catching bullets. But as the journey upriver deepens and the violence becomes surreal, Bottoms' performance subtly shifts. His wide-eyed stares, his silence, his eventual embrace of tribal face paint, all suggest a young man surrendering to a world that no longer makes sense. It was one of the most quietly disturbing performances in the film. What makes his work even more haunting is the fact that Sam Bottoms was battling his own demons during the shoot. He reportedly contracted hookworm while filming in the Philippines and suffered health issues that plagued him for years. Yet he kept going, working alongside Brando, Hopper, and Sheen, never once shrinking in their shadows. Sam had earlier debuted in The Last Picture Show, 1971, and while he never became a household name, his screen presence was undeniable. Sam Bottoms passed away on December 16, 2008, at the age of just 53, from brain cancer. He died young, like his character seemed fated to do. But for those who revisit Apocalypse Now, his performance remains eternal, eerie, and unforgettable. A reminder that even amid the most grotesque horrors of war, the loss of innocence is always the most devastating casualty. Dennis Hopper, the mad prophet of the war zone. In a film drenched in delirium, Dennis Hopper didn't just act mad, he was madness incarnate. As the unnamed photojournalist who serves as Colonel Kurtz's giddy herald, Hopper delivered a performance that was wild, disjointed, poetic, and utterly hypnotic. With jittery energy, flowing rants, and twitching eyes that never stopped dancing, Hopper became the chaotic soul of Apocalypse Now, a man so consumed by the insanity of war that he could only survive by surrendering to it. The beauty, and the danger, of Hopper's performance is that it wasn't entirely a performance. Behind the camera, he was every bit as volatile as the character he portrayed. At the time of filming, Hopper was deep in the throes of drug and alcohol addiction, often reportedly improvising his lines in a frenzy of coke-fueled mania. Coppola let the camera roll, unsure what he'd capture, but knowing it would be unforgettable. And it was. Hopper screeds about Kurtz being a genius, and, beyond good and evil, captured the cult-like seduction of power and madness in wartime. His rambling awe toward Brando's character mirrored the awe many in Hollywood felt, reluctantly or not, toward Brando himself. Hopper, in many ways, served as the bridge between the film's philosophical dread and its psychedelic chaos. Dennis Hopper's real life mirrored the turbulence of his career. After early acclaim in Easy Rider, 1969, he spent years lost in addiction before making comebacks in the 80s and 90s with films like Blue Velvet and Hoosiers. He died on May 29, 2010, at age 74 from prostate cancer, having battled demons both personal and professional, but never losing his creative fire. In Apocalypse Now, Dennis Hopper wasn't just part of the insanity, he was its poet laureate. His death marked the passing of one of cinema's last true rebels. G.D. Spradlin, the bureaucrat of war with a cold smile. While Apocalypse Now is remembered for its surreal jungles and explosive madness, it begins in a quiet, chillingly clinical setting, a dimly lit military briefing room. And at its center is G.D. Spradlin, playing General Corman, the cold architect of Captain Willard's secret mission to terminate with extreme prejudice. Spradlin's performance lasts mere minutes, but it sets the tone for everything that follows. With precise diction, unreadable expressions, and an air of smug detachment, he portrays a military man deeply entrenched in the machinery of war, calculating, composed, and terrifying in his calmness. Unlike Kurtz, who lost his mind in the jungle, Spradlin's character is the type who never had to lose his. He merely outsourced the horror to others. A former lawyer and oilman turned actor, G.D. Spradlin didn't enter Hollywood until later in life. But when he did, he carved out a niche playing morally ambiguous authority figures. He was Senator Pat Geary in The Godfather Part 2, and in Apocalypse Now, he brought the same icy precision to General Corman. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply ordered, and let the darkness unfold elsewhere. Spradlin passed away on July 24, 2011, at the age of 90. He lived a long, full life, and though he rarely played leading roles, his presence was always commanding. In Apocalypse Now, he serves as the gatekeeper to the film's descent, a reminder that the most dangerous figures in war aren't always on the battlefield. Sometimes, they sit in air-conditioned rooms, sipping coffee, sending others to confront the madness they so neatly orchestrate. Apocalypse Now is not just a film, it's a fevered memory, a psychological wound, a cinematic descent that dares us to look directly into the heart of human darkness. But as time marches on, the faces that once brought that vision to life are gradually fading from our world. The loss of Marlon Brando, Frederic Forrest, Sam Bottoms, Dennis Hopper, and G.D. Spradlin is more than the passing of 5 actors. It is the slow fading of a war-ravaged dream that once dared to expose the fragility of sanity and the brutal consequences of power. Each of these men carried something uniquely human into their roles. Brando gave us myth. Forrest gave us fear. Bottoms showed us innocence corrupted. Hopper ranted with prophetic delirium. Spradlin whispered orders with bureaucratic cruelty. Together, they didn't just play parts. They embodied the fractured psyche of a world at war with itself. And in doing so, they helped build a film that continues to resonate across generations. What remains now are shadows and celluloid. And yet, in those flickering images, they live on. Their voices still echo through the jungle. Their eyes still hold fear, wonder, madness. Their performances still challenge us to confront uncomfortable truths about violence, control, and the price of obedience. To remember these actors is not simply to look back. It is to acknowledge the toll of time and to honor the art they left behind. In a world that moves quickly, that forgets easily, this video stands as a quiet salute, a final bow for 5 men who went deep into the cinematic abyss and never flinched. The horror, it lingers still. But so do they.